Hello, I'm Farin Israeli, and I'm a very dedicated yoga student and passionate about how the practices of yoga are really incredible tools for physical, emotional, and mental health and well-being. And I'm really happy to be in conversation with Nicole Marcia, a dear friend and colleague. Nicole, how would you describe the work you do?
Hi, Farah. So great to be here. I would describe the work that I do as I'm a yoga therapist, and I specialize in supporting folks who are working through the experiences of trauma, addiction, and mental illness here in Vancouver, in the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations people.
Let's talk a little bit about body as a resource. You've mentioned it several times. There's so so much emotional and psychological baggage that probably a lot of us carry, let alone with layers of trauma that add another layer of complexity.
Mm.
What does it mean to really use the body as a resource and co-regulate?
Mhm. Well, I mean, first of all, I want to say that, I first came across this idea and the term body as a resource through the trauma center, through Dave Emerson's work in trauma center, trauma sensitive yoga. And, my understanding of body as a resource is that it acknowledges that there are many behaviors, substances, and other outlets that we will access in order to regulate our nervous system, right? So if we're in an experience where we're hyper aroused, there are substances and actions and lots of things that we can engage in order to bring energy down. Um, and vice versa, if we're in a really sort of depressed space, maybe hypo aroused, there are things that we can access in order to bring energy up. So first of all, I think it's important just to acknowledge that, right? There are things that we access that can be very, very effective in the short term for helping to bring us back into center, into a state of what feels like balance. And, we can also acknowledge that many of those substances and behaviors can create a lot of discord for us and for the people in our lives and aren't always necessarily very adaptive in the long term. So we can start to look at this idea of like, well, what else can we bring in that will also support bringing somebody back into center?
Mm-hmm.
So we know that there are certain ways of using the breath and using the body that can support coming back into center. And yes, people's experience with their bodies can be very complicated. And that's one of the reasons why we're always offering choice in all of the practices that we do. And, giving people a lot of space to have whatever kind of experience that they're having. I think what's most important is not necessarily always having a super positive experience, but what's more important is having a relationship with one's students where they can come to me and talk about what the experience is. Because what I know when that happens, if a student feels safe enough to come to me and say, breathing that way was actually very activating for me, what I know is that they feel safe enough in relationship with someone who's inherently in a position of power to talk about what works for their well-being and what doesn't. And that's, again, I keep coming back to it. That's a signal that I'm in a relationship with them where healing can happen.
Mm-hmm.